It's addressed to you, my brothers and sisters. Whenever you face various trials, consider it all joy, because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance complete its work, so that you may be complete and whole, lacking nothing. If any of you is lacking in wisdom, ask God, who gives to all generously and ungrudgingly, and it will be given you. But ask in faith, never doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea driven and tossed by the wind. For the doubter, being double-minded and unstable in every way, must not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Let the brother or sister of human means boast in having a high position, and the rich in having been humble, because the rich will disappear like a flower in the field. For the sun rises with its scorching heat and withers the field. Its flower falls, and its beauty perishes. It is the same way with the rich. In the midst of a busy life, they will wither away. You must understand this, my beloved brothers and sisters. Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. For human anger does not produce God's righteousness. But be doers of the word, and not merely hearers who deceive themselves. This was excerpts from James 1. So ends the reading.
All right, folks. I guess it's our turn to just open this up to your questions. We will do our best to answer. I will tell you as a prep, David's going to be better at church history, Bible, theology. I'm probably going to focus on, if you have questions about parables, symbolism, how dreams relate. There's a whole, in the Bible that people dream and they're meaningful. How does that relate to us today? I'm going to be more psychological, spiritually oriented. Of course, David could speak for himself too. You want to offer any words of wisdom before we begin?
Silence is the best policy.
All right, so Ro, you were going to take the microphone around.
Yes.
So we're just going to open this up, and we'll have about 20 minutes to confuse you completely.
Mine will be a slightly more of like a social informational, and this is for either or both of you, because both of you, when you start your sermons, very often have either an anecdote or a joke or a something, sometimes current interest, sometimes not. And I always wonder whether that, if you keep running lists of ideas for the future, or whether things just come to you, like how I come up with the children's sermons as I'm driving here, things like that. So, you know what I mean? I'm just curious your process.
Oh, that's fun. Both. So, I might be listening to the radio and I hear a cool story, like an amazing, and I'll be like, now that's a good sermon illustration. And if I'm really smart, I'll remember it and write it down. So that's one of the processes. And then I just look at what's the attitude? What am I feeling from the congregation? Maybe I've had some visits where people have had some things that are really pressing hard on them. And I'll just really kind of open myself up to God. what do I need to preach on? Like what's important? What's the need? Of course, so I kind of have that process as well. And then sometimes seasons will help. If it's Advent, Lent, you already have some built-in themes, so that'll help me. I'm not one, though, who can, say, process way far in advance. Like, I'm not one who can do sermon preparation for 6 weeks. Like, I just don't work that way. But the seasons help me then. If I have Advent, then I know, okay, we're talking about getting ready for the birth of Christ. So that's kind of how I work. You want to add anything?
That's a good question. Claudia and I have different processes. It takes her longer to write a sermon than it takes me because words kind of flow out of me anyway. I grew up in the South, as you know, and in the South, preaching is a kind of an oration, and it's a kind of a big deal, and I grew up with a lot of preachers who, some of them had big egos, some were very humble, but they had the tendency to like to get up and speak and to tell jokes and stories, and so I still tell a story, as you mentioned at the beginning of the sermon, usually as a way of engaging the congregation right away. If you start out right away by talking about some theological concept, people go to sleep. And so it's better to tell a story that has some kind of existential relevance or bearing on life. The history of preaching in Protestantism is that, as you know, when Catholicism emerged in Western Europe as separate from Eastern Orthodoxy, the two didn't finally split until about 1000 AD. I always forget the exact date. We still have Eastern Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, Syrian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox. We don't see many of them in Denver, although there is a big Greek Orthodox church over in East Denver. But we have lots of Catholics. And the Catholic service developed the idea, which was really came into its own during the Middle Ages, when life was very hard and short. Thomas Hobbes said, nasty, brutish, and short. And so that church developed a way to make people believe in the power of God and the beauty of heaven, and that they were guaranteed this if they came and confessed to the priest and took Mass. Mass itself as a sacrament is salvific, redemptive. When Martin Luther came along, as you know, he didn't like that idea so much. He felt that it had become somewhat magical and that people needed a heartwarming relationship with God. And so Protestantism developed the idea of a sermon that was based on Scripture, because all through the Middle Ages, the people, most of them couldn't read, and even if they had been able to read, there was no printing press, and so they wouldn't have had Bibles. Bibles were chained up in churches, and they were very expensive, had to be copied by hand. Luther came in right at the time when the printing press had been invented, and so it was a natural time for people to begin to be able to have scriptures and read them, and so the sermon was supposed to be an exegesis of the Bible. And in some Protestant churches today, people still use what's called a lectionary, which is a table of readings. There's a reading from the Old Testament, a reading from the Gospels, and a reading from the Epistles. And if you really want to be a fancy Protestant, you read all three of them. Clyde Miller used to do that. Do you remember when he would come? Anybody remember Clyde Miller, who was our conference minister? He would sometimes read all three readings. It makes the service take a long time, but, you know, he did it. The pulpit we don't use it much anymore, but it's elevated in a Protestant church for that very reason, because the sermon and the exegesis of Scripture replaced the Mass as a central experience of worship. So every once in a while, we like to get up there just to remind you of that history, but some people in our congregation don't like it. They think it's elevated and kind of separates us from, like we're something special, and God knows we don't want that. So anyway, that's the story of that. But I never have been able to preach from the lectionary. Sometimes I do. I just look and see what it says, and if it gives me an idea, that's fine. But if it doesn't, I feel free to do whatever else. And it's hard to do what I no longer do, but Claudia still does do, and that is to think of something new every week. For a few weeks, you can do it, and then you begin to kind of run out of ideas, and you learn different ways of coping with that. But anyway.
I don't think I'm a very good Protestant. Preaching wise. All right, what else?
Couple of questions. Do you view faith as mainly a matter of intellectual belief, or is it a personal relationship with God, and how do you relate the two? And another question for both of you is, what do you view the purpose of prayer as?
The purpose of, can I get your questions so I can look at them? Is faith a matter of intellectual belief, or is it okay, let me repeat that. Is faith mainly a matter of intellectual belief, or is it a personal relationship with God? How do you relate the two? Really good question. I would say the intellect is important, certainly. We want to be open to new ideas. We want to be open to the teachings of the past, but also receptive to things we learn from science and community. But I also think especially I think Western American Christianity, we tend to intellectualize and focus on that instead of the personal relationship. So I think they go together. We want to be thinking, open, reflective, but at the same time, it's all about the personal. How do you experience the sacred in your life? Where is God in your life? Do you have a relationship? To me, that is the point. What is guiding you in your life? Where do you, when you wake up in the morning and you're feeling, and you get on your phone and you look at the New York Times and you see all the doom and gloom, what gives you hope? Do you have a relationship with something that's larger than yourself that will continue to hold you and sustain you? But I would add that you have to work on that. So that's not something that just happens because it sounds good, or because you think you should because you're a Christian. And so we have this sense in which we talk about faith, but are we really experiencing this deeper sense of relatedness to God, to nature, wherever you find the sacred? You want to address that?
You did good.
Is that enough? Was there another part of this question, Karen?
My other question is, what do you view the purpose and outcome of prayer as?
That's a really good question. A couple things. First, I do believe in prayer. And it's as meaningful for the person who is offering the prayer as it is for those who are praying. Because if you think about it, when you move into a sense of prayer, you're shifting your attitude. You're not self-focused on your own needs, but there's a sense in which already you're opening yourself up to the sacred. You are identifying that there's something out there that you believe in or that you trust. So it's as important for the person praying. But then I would also say, when you put yourself in an attitude of compassion, concern, hope, that creates a positive energy, for lack of a better word. That creates an environment that ripples through. So you think about the difference in holding an attitude of hostility versus an attitude of hope, of compassion. And that ripples out. That doesn't just stop in your mind or in your heart. That is something that flows. So I think the more prayer, the better. So I think of it both for the other, but it changes us as well. Do you want to add to that?
I'll see if I can say anything. As children, we think of God as a sort of a supernatural, invisible male figure up in the sky. And we think sometimes of prayer in a corresponding way as an appeal to this invisible person who is everywhere that if we just pray hard enough, somehow faith will enable us to get whatever we want. Jesus said, if prayer can move mountains, which is a kind of a metaphor, but an interesting one. However, in ordinary human experience, and in fact almost universally, we don't find that those kinds of prayers are systematically and consistently answered. Claudia can talk about it better than I can, but she was a chaplain at Children's Hospital for 14 years, and there were lots of parents who prayed for little children, and some of those prayers seemed to work, a lot of them didn't, and the children died. And so you have to, if you're going to have a theology of prayer, you also have to have a theology of what we call the problem of evil, that evil sometimes is indiscriminate and happens to people whether or not they deserve it. So I don't know what else I can say besides that right now, except that I do fervently believe in prayer, but sometimes what that means is that we have to open ourselves to a power that enables us to work more effectively. If you think of prayer as a way of getting God to do something you ought to be doing yourself, that's not too cool. It doesn't generally work. So sometimes prayer leads us to paths that we didn't see before, and sometimes prayer means learning to accept the inevitable. And so I guess that's enough.
First, I wanted to add something to what you were saying about the personal relationship with God. I remember when I was really little, I went to an EUB church, and I think probably every Sunday we sang Jesus Loves Me, and that was the first I knew. And I'm thinking of my first daughter, Karen Lane, was a Down syndrome, probably at the borderline of educable, trainable. So I never knew what intellect she had when she was little, but she too went to church and brightened up with Jesus Loves Me. I don't know what that meant to her intellectually, but she was just such a loving little child. So I feel like knowing that Jesus loved her, she picked that up and loved everybody. She only lived almost 7 years, but what a blessing. Then I have a question, and that is, this is back to theology, I guess, maybe for David. In the Apostles' Creed, it says he descended into hell, and I want to know where they decided it was hell. I know that he said when he met with the disciples again, he said, I have not yet gone to the Father. So can you sort all that out? Thank you.
Okay, you start.
Christian beliefs have always been dynamic and evolving. In the early church, we just have an experience of people at Pentecost and thereafter where this enthusiasm of these people who believed in Jesus made their group spontaneously grow. As it grew, however, you had conflicting opinions, and when you have conflicting opinions, you have people who organize and write statements, and the statements get dragged into groups like this, and people vote, and gradually you get the evolution and the appearance of what we call orthodoxy, which means doxy means teaching and ortho means next to. So orthodoxy is, within the Greek Orthodox Church, that's what that means, is a group that allied themselves with early creeds that were written. Creedalism emerged from about 150 AD to about 400 AD, and by then most of the creeds had been written and agreed upon. The creeds, however, are not very helpful today if you take them literally. I will say the Apostles' Creed. I used to say it, I could still probably say it. I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and in Jesus. It goes on, after all these years. It's a great thing to learn, but I cannot sign off on everything and say I believe this literally. I say it as an act of unity with our Christian heritage when I say it. Now, some of the people, and I don't remember, Kathy, exactly when it happened, but they added this phrase, and descended into hell. That's not in all copies of the Apostles' Creed. Some churches include it and some people don't. Jesus seems very clearly to have believed in some kind of hell because, at least in the Gospels, he talks about it. Hell, in the Gospels, one concept of it is Gehenna. And Gehenna is a hill south of Jerusalem where garbage was burned, and also the bodies of people who were pagans and could not be buried as Jews. In other words, it was an awful place where things were just burned up. And so that's a figure of speech that Jesus used for hell. Most of the things Jesus said were not literal. He never gave us any creeds. He didn't give us ideas. He told stories. And so that was his wisdom. But so anyway, yes, the Apostles' Creed is great, but you don't have to believe it in order to say it. It's sort of like looking at the family album. You may see Great Uncle Fred, who was a horse thief, and you don't like that, but he was still a member of your family, and you can't pretend that he wasn't. That's not a real good metaphor, but a lot of our Christian beliefs and historic statements are like that. We affirm them and reaffirm things that are in the Bible because they were in the original lease, that we signed, but not because we literally accept them today. No.
But I want to just address this briefly from a psycho-spiritual kind of perspective of Jesus descending into hell. And so if we don't take that like literally, now I grew up, my mom was always telling me if you don't do this or that, you're going to burn in hell, right? Like there was a hellfire, and we were taught that your skin will be singeing off your body for eternity, and you'll just be in this writhing pain. That's pretty awful, right? But I want to think of this in a different way. Jesus ascending to hell, one of the aspects of his saving grace, his liberation, his hope, is that he went everywhere that we went. He suffered grief. He had joy. He enjoyed his friends. And if you think about hell as this absence of meaning, of desolation, of feeling abandoned, you could say on the cross when he says, "My God, why hast thou forsaken me?" He suffered the denial of his friends. So he went through a kind of hell of friends rejecting him, of feeling abandoned by God. So that's where I kind of go with that in a way he suffered. He felt that the kind of suffering that we feel. And that to me is what's so transforming and moving to me. That gives me hope that he went through it. And I'm not a literalist. I don't take the Bible inerrantly, but I take it, a lot of it symbolically. And so it means the hells that we go through, there's a way through it that brings us to greater life.
A footnote to my God, why hast thou forsaken me? When Jesus said that, he was quoting Psalm 22. He didn't just make that up on the spot. And if you go back and read Psalm 22 at length, it describes some of the experiences that he was having on the cross. So you should try that. The other thing that's important about faith is that there's not this objective body of Christianity that you just sign on to. Some things are true for us as Christians because we believe them, because we're committed to them. A marriage works with another person, if it does work, because you're both committed to one another. The truth of your relationship comes partly from your commitment, and that's partly the way Christianity works. If you're committed to Christian ideas, then for you they are true. This really comes from the philosopher William James, who said, truth, anyway.
Go ahead, finish the quote. Finish the quote.
He just said that some things, belief creates truth. For some things.
Yeah.
So my question was back on the prayer question. How do you either relate or define prayer versus meditation? And do you do both, or how do you relate those two?
I do both, and I think even in meditation, there are, there are many approaches. So there's an emptying, the kind of meditation where there's just letting go of thoughts, allowing them to just be present. We have a meditation every Wednesday at the church. I think of prayer as it can be more intentional. Like there's a sense in which we're bringing something to consciousness. Although I think there is this kind of crossover. Who was it? Charles Milligan's wife who said something about, tell him the story about prayer in the garden.
Charles was one of our teachers at Iliff, and he said there are all kinds of prayer. And then he used his wife as an example. He said, when Nancy waters her plants, that's a form of prayer for her. And Nancy said, hush, you'll spoil it for me.
But so I would say I meditate and I pray. And when I approach meditation, it tends to be just being present to what is, what's coming. Prayer, I tend to be a little more focused on concerns that I have for others, for myself, for the world. But I think they're both good. And the more you do it, the better. I will say, though, meditation tends to calm my nervous system. I tend to become less agitated with the world. If I spend 20 minutes in meditation, I feel more grounded. So it's the experience to me is more almost embodied.
Dina had a question. Does the Bible mention Jesus' family beyond Joseph and Mary?
It does, but it's very terse about that. There is a section in the Gospels where his mother, Jesus is out, amazingly, when he was in his late 20s or early 30s, this person who'd been a kind of a quiet guy, evidently, for all these years, went out and started this ministry and called disciples, and his family thought he had gone cuckoo, doing all this sort of street preaching and stuff like that. So his mother and his brothers, Mary, evidently, we don't know anything about Joseph after the Christmas stories. We know that he was a carpenter, but that's it. We don't know how long he lived or what happened to him. Presumably, he died from something before Jesus had his public ministry. But we know that he had brothers because Mary, as she goes out to look for Jesus and bring him back home to Nazareth and make him act normally again, she doesn't go out by herself. She gets all the brothers to go with him. And he has this famous statement. Somebody comes to him and says, your mother and brothers are out looking for you. And he says, my mother and my brothers are all those who see the will of God and do it. So this seems like kind of an abrupt way for him to cut off his mother. But if you put it in the context, it makes a certain amount of sense.
All right, well, I think we are at about time. Are there any comments? Anybody wants to offer their own words or have a final question? Are we all good? Constance, we'll try to be brief with our answers.
Okay, for me, Christianity is a set of stories and symbols that, as David says, if you're a Christian, you believe in your heart, they're true for you. But other religions have other stories and other sets of symbols. Can they also be true?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you think about all the different, within Christianity, all the different trajectories it's taken. You have Buddhism, Islam, all these other, Judaism. So paganism, Sufism. I mean, you can keep going. So I would say the way I heard it that was really helpful was different religions have emerged out of the cultures and the needs and the psyches of the people. So if you grew up in different areas of the world, there's nature religions. We think about certainly ancient people that, of course, they're all important. They all grow out of a sacred experience. So I would say if you want a testament to the reality of God, look historically, from the beginning of time, people were putting things in caves. 50,000 years ago, a testament to something sacred they were experiencing. So all of that to me is meaningful and worthy of honoring.
Again, quoting Charles Milligan, who was one of our teachers, he used to say religions are like languages. If you are in the United States or England, English works pretty well. But if you're in India, it's better not to have English as your primary language in ordinary commerce with people because they speak other languages there. Religions work for different people in different contexts and different communities if they make life healthier. And if they make you a more holistic, integrated person and you have better relationships with other people and you are able to forgive and things like that. Erich Fromm, the psychoanalyst, said that there are two kinds of religion, whether it's Buddhism or Christianity or Hinduism or any kind of religion, but there are two types that all of them can be separated into. One type is humanistic, which glorifies the strengths of human beings and finds God's presence in the good things that people are able to do because of God's presence. And the other kind of religion is authoritarian, which makes a bunch of rules and says everybody has to follow these, and we're pretty crappy and messed up, and therefore we need this miraculous event to save us. And you can see that there are, he said, that difference in the type of religion transcends just Christianity or whatever. But anyway.
Good. Yeah, I would just add, I remember I had a professor at Iliff who said, all religions are valuable, but the point is to go deeper into whatever it is your particular religious perspective and allow it to really inform you. And certainly we are human beings. Who was it who said we're spiritual beings having a human experience? But humans then take these kind of transcendent beliefs, ideas, and then really kind of put it on themselves as though they are the God, they are the one setting the rules. So I think we do have to be honest. What?
Humble.
Honest and humble, and continue to kind of discern God's will and purpose for us. But there's a lot, obviously, there's a lot of expressions and I like to think, and then I'll wrap up, I like to kind of evaluate the religious perspective on, is it healthy or unhealthy? Is it offering opportunities for wholeness? Is it constructive? Is it tearing down? Is it diminishing your sense of your human worth? Or is it lifting you up and empowering you? Is it bringing you to an honest assessment of yourself, or are you kind of in a delusion because maybe you have the truth? So I think we kind of continue to look at, to me, what's healthy, what's whole, what's affirming, what's uplifting, what is creating growth instead of hate and division. Thank you.